Hey everyone! Tonight we're stepping into the shadows of Operation Harbor Light, one of Mossad's most daring and secretive missions. From 2007 to 2009, intelligence operatives tracked Iranian arms moving through Sudan toward Gaza. A deadly game played across deserts, seas, and networks of spies. Every step was a risk. Every decision could cost lives. And not everything went as planned. Before we dive in, hit like and subscribe if you love uncovering the world's most hidden intelligence operations. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing who's awake, unraveling these mysteries with me. Now, take a breath. Tonight we enter a world of silent surveillance, hidden convoys, and dangerous choices made far from anyone's sight. The story of Operation Harbor Light begins here. The desert stretched endlessly under a moonless sky, silent except for the faint hum of engines far off in the distance. Somewhere in Sudan, a convoy of trucks crawled through the sand, carrying a cargo that could tilt the balance of a conflict thousands of miles away. Mossad had eyes on them, GPS trackers embedded without the driver's knowledge, Bedouin informants positioned along hidden dunes, and operatives listening intently over encrypted lines. One slip, one misstep, and the shipment would vanish into the desert like smoke. But tonight, every heartbeat mattered, every signal counted, and the Israeli Air Force waited on command. Time stretched, tension compressed, the desert held its breath, and so did those watching it from afar. By 2007, the intelligence picture was grim. Iran's networks had found a clever loophole through Sudan, sending weapons destined for Gaza across seas and deserts, shielded by smugglers, shadowed by double agents, and hidden behind the unlikeliest of alliances. Mossad had been tracking these routes for months. A quiet war played out over hundreds of miles of barren land. Bedouin informants, whose lives balanced on silence and secrecy, risked everything for a paycheck they would never see again, passing word of convoys that could appear at any moment. Each convoy told a story. Trucks laden with arms, their GPS tags silently feeding a web of unseen eyes, the coordinates ticking toward a target that might never materialize. Inside a safe house, operatives monitored the desert like hawks. Screens flickered with data, signals, and occasional human error. One operative muttered under his breath, "They're moving faster than we thought. Someone's trying to beat the net." Another tapped at a keyboard, triangulating positions, calculating strike windows, weighing risks against consequences. No one spoke of fear. It was a currency they couldn't afford. But every flicker of a convoy on the map sent a rush of adrenaline through the team. This was the art of shadow warfare, waiting, calculating, and striking without a trace. The smugglers moved like ghosts, blending with the sand, guided only by whispers and moonlight. Mossad's plan relied on precision, patience, and timing that bordered on obsession. A single GPS signal could make the difference between a successful interdiction and an invisible failure. Operatives had to anticipate betrayal as much as movement. Intelligence had to be interpreted, not just received. One wrong assumption, one overlooked detail, and the mission, and the lives depending on it, would unravel in an instant. By the time the convoy reached a crossroads far from any official road, the operators held their breath. A tracker blinked. Another blinked. Calculations confirmed it. The cargo was moving as expected. But shadows in the sand suggested someone else was watching, someone with their own agenda. A mole? A rival agent? The thought lingered for a heartbeat, then vanished into professional focus. The moment had arrived to decide, strike now or wait for confirmation, risking the shipment's disappearance entirely. The desert held its secret, and only action could unveil it. Mossad had learned that in operations like this, the human element was as unpredictable as the terrain. Informants could falter, smugglers could turn, and even technology could betray them. Yet, the web was closing in. Signals aligned, positions confirmed, and the operative's pulse matched the rhythm of the desert night. Somewhere, hidden in the dunes, a single phone buzzed with coordinates that would determine life, death, and the quiet victories that never made the headlines. The hunt was on, and it had already begun before anyone could see it. Months of shadowing convoys had taught the team patience, and patience now demanded courage. Each report that filtered in from the Bedouin scouts painted a picture of increasing risk, vehicles moving under cover of night, extra guards placed suspiciously, and routes altered as if anticipating observation. Mossad's analysts recalculated, considering every possibility, every deception, every potential trap. One operative leaned back, whispering into a secure channel, "If they sense us, the entire network could vanish." Silence answered him, the desert night indifferent to their fears. But even as tension mounted, the team discovered patterns. Convoys tended to pause at hidden waypoints. Exchanges with local contacts left traces, and the faint outlines of desert trails revealed more than the smugglers thought. Mossad's intelligence wasn't just watching movement, it was reading intent. Every blink of a GPS signal, every whispered message from an informant, every seemingly trivial detail was a brushstroke in a larger painting of strategy, patience, and imminent confrontation. The operation was not just a mission. It was a living organism of calculation and risk, stretching across borders and oceans, feeding off the quiet chaos of the desert night. By dawn, the outlines of the convoys were clear. Tracks in the sand told a story of routes, timings, and most importantly, opportunity. The moment of choice hovered over the team like a shadow. Strike too early and the operation could fail. Strike too late and the cargo would escape, potentially arming thousands in Gaza. And yet, for all the risk, for all the shadows and potential betrayals, one thing remained certain. Mossad had prepared for this night, and they would not leave it to chance. The desert was theirs to read, the signals theirs to interpret, and the hunt had only just begun. The desert sun had barely risen when the team realized the convoy's movement was unlike anything they had predicted. Tracks shifted. Some trucks had split from the main formation, and subtle signs indicated that someone, or something, was trying to manipulate the intelligence they relied on. The Bedouin informants whispered over encrypted lines, their voices tense but controlled. 2 vehicles took the southern pass. No GPS signal. Could be decoys, one said, and the operative listening froze, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Every piece of information now had to be scrutinized, cross-referenced, and weighed against the possibility of deception. Mossad had long learned that in such operations, nothing was simple, and every certainty could be a lie. Inside a secure safe house far from the convoy, the team worked like surgeons performing a delicate operation under pressure. Analysts tracked GPS signals, recalculated coordinates, and sifted through multiple streams of communications intercepted from smugglers' phones. One operative muttered, "They know we're watching. They're testing us." Another countered softly, "No, they're probing, not panicking. That's what makes this operation dangerous and brilliant." Outside, the wind scoured the desert, erasing footprints, hiding movement, and masking intentions. It was a reminder that for every detail Mossad captured, the terrain itself could conspire to undermine them. By mid-morning, the analysts detected a pattern in the convoy's unusual detours. The southern trucks, initially thought to be decoys, were moving toward a concealed meeting point near a seasonal wadi, a dried riverbed that ran like a faint scar through the desert. It was a natural funnel for traffic, and Mossad knew that if they could reach it first, they could verify the cargo without exposing the full operation. The Air Force was on standby, but timing was everything. Too early, and the strike would hit empty trucks, wasting precision and alerting the network. Too late, and the arms would vanish into the labyrinth of Sudanese desert tracks. Meanwhile, a tension far more personal threaded through the team. A new informant, young and eager, had been embedded with the smugglers only weeks earlier, and whispers of potential betrayal surfaced as discrepancies in reporting emerged. One moment, he insisted the convoy had taken the eastern route. The next, the southern trackers contradicted him. The operative in charge of field intelligence frowned, a cold realization settling in. He could be feeding both sides, he said quietly. Every mission had risks, but a mole inside a desert convoy was a risk multiplied by 10. Every decision now carried the weight of potential catastrophe. As the day wore on, the convoy neared the wadi, and the first real confrontation with the unpredictable human element occurred. A group of Bedouin scouts reported movement at the edge of the dunes, figures not associated with the convoy moving as if shadowing it. Were they rival smugglers, Iranian handlers, or local tribesmen drawn into the clandestine web of profit and survival? The operative monitoring the feed tensed. "Someone is on them," he muttered, eyes flicking between maps, satellites, and intercepted signals. The risk of exposure increased exponentially with every passing minute, and the team had to make a choice: intercept the trucks now or wait for further confirmation. The decision came down to a combination of intuition, experience, and cold calculation. Mossad had learned to trust patterns and instincts in equal measure. Analysts suggested the southern trucks were carrying the heaviest, most dangerous payloads, likely the kind that could change the strategic balance in Gaza. The potential for loss, both operationally and politically, was staggering. A small miscalculation could result in arms reaching militant hands, prompting retaliation, emboldening networks, and threatening countless lives. The team coordinated quietly, each movement synchronized, each message coded, each operative aware that a single wrong signal could compromise months of surveillance. As the convoy reached the wadi, a subtle but unmistakable tension took hold. The trackers indicated stops, exchanges with local contacts, and the offloading of crates disguised under tarps. For the first time, Mossad had a near confirmation of the cargo's contents. The Air Force was notified, drones had eyes overhead, and field operatives in vehicles hidden miles away adjusted positions, ready to act on the go. Yet, even as everything aligned for a strike, the mole's shadow loomed. Discrepancies persisted, reports conflicted just enough to sow doubt. Could they trust the information? Could they risk the strike? Every second seemed stretched into eternity. Night fell again, bringing the desert's cold and the final act of patience. Operatives whispered into satellite phones, coordinating minute movements of personnel and equipment. Every detail mattered: the timing of engines starting, trucks pausing for refueling, a guard shifting positions. It was a silent war of observation, waiting for the exact moment when action would become decisive. Then, as if choreographed by fate, the southern convoy moved into the narrowest section of the wadi, the natural funnel constraining the trucks, leaving them momentarily exposed to observation and intervention. The team held their breath, watching the digital map blink with the convoy's slow crawl. Then a subtle anomaly appeared. A vehicle that should have been in the southern line was missing, replaced by a shadow track leading away from the wadi. The mole? A diversion? Or just coincidence? The operative at the keyboard whispered a single word: complication. Everyone froze. Months of preparation, thousands of miles of surveillance, and the fate of an entire strike now depended on reading the desert correctly, interpreting every nuance, and deciding whether to act before the network adapted. Minutes passed, like hours. Finally, the trackers confirmed the crates' positions. The cargo was real. It was substantial. It was lethal. Mossad had been given a narrow window to act before the smugglers would scatter into the dunes, dispersing their deadly cargo across unknown paths. Field operatives signaled readiness, drones hovered unseen, and in the safe house, hands hovered over keyboard, waiting for the final decision. The desert held its breath. The convoy crept forward, and a whisper of movement suggested the enemy, or someone allied with them, was closing in. And then, the impossible happened. One of the southern trucks deviated sharply, veering toward an untracked path in the wadi, as if sensing the invisible eyes watching it. Analysts screamed into headsets, field operatives scrambled silently, and for the first time, Mossad's calculated precision seemed at risk of unraveling. The team reacted instantly, predicting the route, repositioning observers, and recalculating strike parameters. The chase became a deadly game of anticipation. trucks in the sand, operatives on rooftops and in vehicles, drones above, GPS pings flashing like tiny warnings across maps. Every moment held the weight of consequence. Every decision balanced risk against reward. Every shadow in the desert was a question mark. Every faint movement a potential betrayal. Mossad's operation, months in planning and patience, now boiled down to seconds of judgment, instinct, and the unforgiving silence of the Red Sea desert. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the Air Force waited, poised to act, as the team prepared to take the leap from observation into intervention, fully aware that one misstep could let the arms slip through their fingers forever. The southern convoy, carrying the fate of an unseen war, entered the narrowest stretch of the wadi again. The informants whispered coordinates. Drones transmitted real-time visuals. Analysts calculated strike windows. And just as the final moments of decision approached, a flicker of movement, a figure running across the dunes, silhouetted against the night, suggested that even in this controlled web of intelligence, chaos had found a way in. Mossad would have to strike with certainty in a world defined by uncertainty, and the desert, indifferent and eternal, waited to see who would prevail. The convoy's movement grew erratic as night deepened, the desert transforming from a passive backdrop into a labyrinth of shadows and unseen eyes. The southern trucks, once predictable in their routine, began weaving through hidden passes, the faint glow of GPS trackers blinking intermittently like a heartbeat under the sand. Each signal that came through the encrypted channels carried both confirmation and question, every pulse a warning that the smugglers might have sensed the invisible net tightening around them. Mossad's operatives, spread across miles of desert and within a safe house hundreds of miles away, felt the tension coil tighter with each passing second. They were spectators and participants in a silent war, where timing and observation could tip the scales between success and failure. In the safe house, the lead operative leaned over the table, reviewing satellite overlays and convoy projections. "They're testing us," he murmured, tracing a finger along the map. "Every detour, every stop, they want to see what we can do." Around him, analysts cross-referenced intercepted communications, noting discrepancies, pauses, coded language, and the subtle use of dialect that hinted at multiple actors moving through the network. One of the informants, a young Bedouin who had been embedded with the smugglers for months, had begun to hesitate in his reports. His voice on the encrypted line wavered, a flicker of doubt or fear that rippled across the team. Could he be compromised? Or was this the subtle strain of exhaustion from months of living in shadow, constantly balancing survival and loyalty? As the convoy pressed forward, the desert itself conspired against clarity. Sandstorms kicked up without warning, reducing visibility to almost nothing. GPS signals became erratic, drones struggled to maintain a stable feed, and the convoy's movement blurred into a shifting, untraceable line. Field operatives, hidden in vehicles miles apart, whispered through headsets, coordinating adjustments with near impossible precision. Every plan had to be rewritten in real time, each decision a gamble against both nature and human unpredictability. The southern trucks had become a moving puzzle, each piece carrying crates that could arm a city and shift power in ways few outside this clandestine network could imagine. It was then that the first hint of betrayal became apparent. A coded message intercepted from one of the smugglers' phones suggested that someone within the network knew the convoy was being watched. Analysts debated the likelihood of a mole, tracing previous reports for patterns of misinformation. One operative realized a troubling fact. The young Bedouin informant's updates had been accurate for months, but recent signals suggested a subtle misdirection, enough to make a strike risky without exposing their eyes on the convoy. The tension thickened, a silent countdown to revelation and catastrophe. Every second of hesitation allowed the cargo to move further out of reach, yet acting without certainty risked blowing months of planning. As night fell fully, the convoy reached a ridge that overlooked a narrow wadi. The southern trucks slowed, pausing as if sensing the invisible net closing around them. Drones hovered overhead, relaying intermittent visuals, while field operatives adjusted positions to remain unseen. The lead operative whispered into his secure channel, "We have the strike window. We need confirmation of the crates." An informant's quiet voice responded, "They're unloading. Tarps, hiding the shipments. It's all here." A flicker of relief passed through the team, tempered instantly by the knowledge that exposure could come from anywhere, even the shifting shadows at the edge of the wadi. The mole's presence became undeniable when a faint signal diverged from expected patterns. A tracker that should have followed the convoy now blinked along an uncharted route. Analysts exchanged tense glances. "Someone's moving ahead of them," one said. "It's not part of the convoy." Field operatives silently repositioned, watching for movement that might betray the traitors' intentions. The desert had become a chessboard of hidden threats and calculated moves, every sand dune a potential stage for confrontation. Mossad's strategy relied on precision, yet the human element, the unpredictable, emotional, and often desperate choices of individuals, remained the variable that could undo months of work in a single moment. As the convoy crept along the wadi, the operatives realized the trucks had begun to split again. The southernmost vehicle veered toward Derwart's Dora side path, a faint plume of dust marking the divergence. Analysts recalculated coordinates, drones followed the vehicle, and a field operative whispered into a headset, "They're trying to shake us off. Don't let them vanish." The chase became a deadly rhythm of anticipation, tracking the unpredictable movements of men who believed themselves invisible, predicting routes through a desert that could erase every footprint, and maintaining a careful balance between action and patience. One misstep, and the entire operation could collapse. The hours stretched into an eerie, quiet tension, punctuated by small, critical discoveries. The southern trucks carried the heaviest and most dangerous payloads, confirmed now by close observation of their unloading procedures. The Air Force was ready to strike, but final confirmation was still pending. A single miscommunication could send a bomb to the wrong location, or leave the arms intact. The lead operative weighed every detail, listening to whispered reports from informants and field operatives alike. The young Bedouin, his voice trembling slightly, described the meticulous arrangements of the cargo, the presence of armed guards, and the careful choreography of the smugglers. Every word was a thread in the web of surveillance, every hesitation a potential warning of betrayal. And then the unthinkable happened. One of the convoy's trucks vanished from the trackers entirely, slipping down a side path hidden by the dunes, the GPS signal lost. Panic flared silently among the operatives. Was it sabotage, a miscalculation, or simply the desert's randomness? Analysts worked frantically, triangulating movement, scanning satellite imagery, and recalculating routes in real time. Field operatives adjusted positions, racing across unseen tracks, whispering coordinates back to the safe house. The tension was palpable. The desert, indifferent to human strategy, had taken on the role of adversary, and Mossad's operatives felt the weight of every second. As they pursued the rogue vehicle, another discovery deepened the crisis. Signals intercepted from the convoy indicated the presence of another party, unidentified operatives shadowing the smugglers, possibly Iranian agents or local collaborators. The implication was clear. Someone else was aware of Mossad's interest, watching them as closely as they had been watching the convoy. The stakes had multiplied. Every decision carried not just operational risk, but the potential for lives lost, intelligence exposed, and the mission compromised. Field operatives whispered in urgent tones, coordinating maneuvers in real time, while analysts worked feverishly to anticipate the enemy's next move. The southern convoy entered a particularly narrow stretch of the wadi, natural walls of sand constraining their movement. It was the perfect moment for intervention, yet the mole's subtle influence complicated everything. One operator, eyes fixed on the trackers, whispered, "If we act now, the other side may see us. If we wait, they'll disappear into the desert." The decision weighed like a stone in the chest of the lead operative, every heartbeat counting down to either triumph or disaster. Then came the decisive moment. The rogue vehicle emerged from the dunes briefly, exposing the crates of weapons, tarps flapping lightly in the desert wind. Observers confirmed the cargo, dozens of crates heavy and deadly, enough to arm a small battalion. Field operatives signaled readiness. Drones relayed the position to command. The Air Force was ready. Everything converged in a single point of tension. The desert, silent for hours, seemed to hold its breath as Mossad prepared to strike. But even as preparations were finalized, the mole made a move. A subtle signal diverted attention, drawing one operative away. And for a fleeting moment, the rogue truck's path became unpredictable. Analysts cursed under their breath, recalculated strike windows, and repositioned operatives with surgical precision. It was a moment of pure, calculated chaos, human intuition, technology, and risk interlaced in a deadly ballet. Finally, the southern convoy reached the narrowest stretch of the wadi again. The trackers blinked steadily, the drones maintained visual confirmation, and the Air Force awaited the command. Informants whispered coordinates with trembling certainty. The mole's influence still lingered, a ghost in the system, but Mossad's team had anticipated contingencies. Seconds stretched into eternity as the decision hung, balancing the destructive potential of the cargo against the need for precise surgical intervention. And in that tense, suspended silence, the desert revealed its final secret for the night. One of the convoy's side paths was a trap, a calculated maneuver that would test every ounce of skill, judgment, and patience the operatives possessed. Mossad's entire plan depended on understanding the unseen, predicting the unpredictable, and striking at the exact right moment. One error could send weapons into hostile hands, unmask operatives, and shatter months of intelligence work in an instant. The team exchanged silent nods. The moment of action was imminent. The trackers, the drones, the whispers of Bedouin informants, the careful choreography of every operative all converged on a single point in the desert. And as the moon cast a pale glow over the dunes, the hunt, the suspense, and the shadow war reached a breaking point, poised on the knife edge of success or catastrophe. The desert night seemed to stretch endlessly as the southern convoy entered the narrowest stretch of the wadi, the sand walls pressing in like silent witnesses to the unfolding tension. Every heartbeat of the Mossad operatives monitoring the operation was amplified by the subtle flicker of trackers, the whisper of wind, and the faint shuffles of tires across sand. The rogue truck, carrying crates that could alter the balance in Gaza, inched forward, unaware that every move had been anticipated, mapped, and interpreted in painstaking detail hours before. Drones hovered above, their lenses capturing every shadow, every movement, feeding a live map to operatives scattered across miles of desert. Yet, despite the technology, despite the months of planning, one thing remained constant: the unpredictable nature of humans and the possibility of betrayal lurking in the shadows. Inside a nondescript safe house, the lead operative's eyes darted across multiple screens. Satellite feeds, GPS pings, intercepted communications, all converged into a single point of decision. "Strike window is open," he muttered, voice taut with tension, his hand hovering over the secure line to the Air Force. Analysts and operatives around him moved in silent, synchronized motion, each task rehearsed yet fraught with the awareness that nothing would go perfectly. A single error could expose agents in the field, leave the cargo intact, or worse, tip off Iranian handlers that they were being watched. Outside, the wind whispered through the dunes, indifferent to human calculation, indifferent to the lives balanced on these precise, invisible moves. The Bedouin informants, hidden miles away, whispered updates with a mix of fear and urgency. They're offloading, guard patterns consistent, confirmed presence of heavy crates, one said, voice trembling just enough to betray tension. The operative listening replied, "Maintain position. Do not deviate. We are counting on your eyes." Every word carried weight. Every report was both lifeline and gamble. These men, whose names would never appear in reports, risked everything in silence. Their courage was as invisible as the trackers blinking in the sand, yet it was the linchpin of the entire operation. And then, as if the desert itself conspired to challenge them, the rogue vehicle shifted unexpectedly. The tracker blinked erratically, and the operative at the console cursed under his breath. Deviation. Calculating route. It's moving into an untracked path. Analysts scrambled, recalculating coordinates, predicting where the vehicle would emerge next. Field operatives whispered instructions, their voices low and precise, eyes scanning dunes for movement that might indicate ambush, decoy, or escape. It was a deadly dance of anticipation, the kind that defined every Mossad operation. Move too soon, and you reveal your presence. Move too late, and the target disappears into the desert, unrecoverable. Time seemed suspended as the convoy crept along the side path. The crates, wrapped in tarps and guarded with lethal precision, were now within reach of the Air Force's strike zone, yet every element remained fluid. A mole's subtle interference had created doubt, a split-second hesitation that threatened to undo the months of meticulous surveillance. One operative whispered, "The other side knows. They're testing our reaction. Every pause, every adjustment. This is deliberate." The operative at the command console's fingers hovered, calculating risk versus reward, precision versus uncertainty, human instinct versus raw data. The desert, silent and vast, seemed to absorb the tension, compressing it into a single, sharp point of potential catastrophe. Field operatives positioned themselves along the dunes, each movement measured, each breath quiet. One misstep could alert the smugglers, the mole, or hidden observers. Another operative whispered coordinates to a drone operator. "Confirm visual on all trucks. Don't lose line of sight." The monitors flickered, GPS blips blinked, and the convoy inched forward, unaware that the net had tightened to a razor-thin margin. Every second was amplified. The anticipation coiled tighter, as if the night itself were a living entity, holding its breath, waiting for the decisive strike. The Air Force awaited the command, pilots and operators trained for months on similar interventions, poised to release precision payloads that would neutralize the threat without unnecessary destruction. Yet, even with all technology, all planning, and all anticipation, the human element remained unpredictable. A shadow at the edge of the wadi, fleeting but unmistakable, hinted at the presence of an observer, another agent, perhaps a rival intelligence operative, perhaps a traitor. Mossad operatives adjusted their calculations in real time, feeding new coordinates to the safe house, recalibrating timing, and preparing for contingencies. Every heartbeat counted, every flicker of signal held weight, and the desert itself became a crucible of tension. Then came the moment of action. The southernmost truck, the one veering into the side path, slowed near a dune ridge, the tarps rustling in the wind, revealing just enough of the deadly cargo. Operatives signaled readiness, drones held position, cameras tracking each crate, each guard, each subtle movement. A whisper crackled over a secure line. Strike confirmation received, payload verified. Silence followed, the kind that fills the desert before chaos. Then the lead operative gave the command, a single word transmitted through encrypted channels, and the operation shifted from observation to execution. The strike was precise. Drones relayed visuals as the Air Force released its payload. Explosions erupted in the night, controlled and deadly, targeting the exact trucks carrying arms. The desert trembled, sand and dust obscuring immediate confirmation. Yet, the signals on the monitors confirmed success. The lethal cargo was neutralized. The convoy erupted into chaos, drivers scattering, guards scrambling, and yet Mossad's operatives held position, watching every movement, tracking every escape attempt, and ensuring that no threat remained unchecked. But even in the success, uncertainty lingered. One side path remained unverified, another signal flickered inconsistently, and the mole's subtle hand had not revealed itself fully. Analysts worked furiously to confirm destruction and track potential survivors. The Bedouin informants relayed whispers of men fleeing into the dunes, crates left behind or scattered, and vehicles lost among sand and shadow. The strike had succeeded in its objective, yet the night's work was not complete. The aftershocks would ripple across the intelligence landscape, revealing gaps, exposing patterns, and perhaps signaling to adversaries that Mossad's presence was more formidable than they realized, or more vulnerable than they feared. Operatives exchanged terse reports over encrypted lines. "Targets neutralized, but monitor all exits. Check for survivors or untracked crates." The desert wind carried the distant echoes of explosions, the faint scent of burnt diesel, and the heavy weight of tension that always followed such operations. The Air Force withdrew to safe distance, leaving Mossad's operatives to ensure the operation's integrity in the immediate aftermath. Even as the dust settled, a deeper tension lingered. The mole. Somewhere in the shadows, someone had influenced events, perhaps deliberately, perhaps through fear or self-preservation. The subtle disruptions, the errant signals, the deviations in reporting, all pointed to a hidden presence within the network. The team worked meticulously, cross-referencing GPS data, informant reports, and intercepted communications, piecing together a picture of who had acted against them, who had maintained loyalty, and who might yet betray at the next opportunity. The psychological weight was heavy. Operatives contemplated the desert night, the lives potentially saved or endangered, and the silent courage of the informants who had guided them. Months of surveillance, calculation, and patience had led to this moment, yet the shadow of uncertainty remained, a reminder that espionage was never neat, never complete, and never without personal cost. Every action had a consequence, and every success carried a whisper of vulnerability. In the hours following the strike, field operatives moved carefully among the dunes, confirming targets, securing perimeters, and ensuring no traces of the operation remained visible to anyone who might investigate. The southern convoy, scattered and neutralized, left a pattern of destruction that would take months for adversaries to understand fully. Informants, exhausted but alive, reported back from hidden positions, their voices barely audible over the encrypted channels. Every signal, every confirmation, every whispered word contributed to the mosaic of intelligence that defined Mossad's silent war. And yet, even as the operation drew to a close, one figure remained unaccounted for, a shadow among shadows, a signal that had deviated without explanation. Analysts scoured the data, field operatives combed the dunes, and the Safe House team reviewed every report, knowing that in the world of espionage, no victory was ever absolute. The mole, or the unseen agent, could strike again, could redirect information, could unravel months of careful planning in a single, silent moment. The desert held its secrets, and Mossad had learned long ago that the line between hunter and hunted could shift in the blink of an eye. By dawn, the immediate threat had been neutralized, the southern convoy destroyed, and the operation, for all intents and purposes, a success. Yet, in the minds of every operative, the knowledge lingered that this was only one battle in a war fought in shadows. The desert, silent now, except for wind through dunes, bore witness to the meticulous choreography of intelligence, risk, and human courage. Mossad had struck, the cargo was gone, and the immediate danger averted. But the ghost of the mole, the whispers of informants, and the ever-present uncertainty ensured that the operation's consequences would ripple far beyond the dunes, unseen and unresolved. The desert lay quiet, almost too quiet as the first pale light of dawn stretched over the dunes. The southern convoy had been neutralized, the crates destroyed, and yet Mossad operatives remained tense, knowing that victory was only the beginning. Each footprint, each disturbed wisp of sand, each faint plume of smoke could tell a story, and every story had consequences. In the safe house, analysts pored over satellite feeds and GPS data, confirming the strike's success, but a nagging sense of incompleteness lingered. One tracker still flickered faintly, a ghost signal that refused to vanish, hinting at a survivor or a miscalculation. The mole's subtle fingerprints had not yet fully revealed themselves, and the operative leading the mission felt the weight of unspoken questions pressing on his mind. Field operatives moved cautiously among the dunes, checking each ridge and hollow for survivors or undetected cargo. The Bedouin informants, exhausted but alert, whispered updates over secure channels. "One vehicle missing," one said quietly. "It may have slipped into the northern trail. Guards, 5 in total, armed." The lead operative froze for a heartbeat, calculating risks, weighing options, and then gave the command to pursue. Every step in the desert required precision. Every movement had to account for ambush, deception, and the unpredictable nature of humans who had nothing to lose and everything to conceal. By mid-morning, intelligence indicated the rogue vehicle had indeed evaded immediate capture, slipping toward a narrow canyon used as a natural funnel. Drones followed at a distance, feeding live visuals to the safe house. Analysts cross-referenced every signal with intercepted communications, reconstructing probable routes and estimating the destination. Every second of delay increased the chance that the cargo, or the men transporting it, would escape entirely. The desert had been a testing ground of patience, precision, and human resolve, and it would continue to be so until the operation was fully complete. Meanwhile, reports from the northern region suggested unusual movement, vehicles, possibly scouts or local collaborators, appearing where none were expected. Mossad's analysts suspected these were either elements tied to the original smuggling network or shadow operatives seeking to exploit the strike for their own intelligence gain. The operative in command realized that every piece of post-strike information was a potential trap or misdirection. One false assumption could undo the carefully orchestrated operation, allowing the very weapons they had destroyed to be replaced, hidden, or diverted to unknown hands. Hours passed intense calculation. The team triangulated positions, confirmed the presence of a small number of armed men in the northern canyon, and decided on a tactical approach. Field operatives, using silent vehicles and careful cover, moved along parallel dunes, keeping the rogue convoy in sight without revealing their own positions. Every radio whisper, every careful observation, every footfall in sand was part of a carefully choreographed dance of surveillance and anticipation. The Air Force remained on standby, but the decision to strike again rested on confirming the cargo, neutralizing threats, and ensuring minimal risk to civilians or unintended targets. As the sun climbed higher, subtle signs of betrayal began to emerge. One informant, whose reports had consistently aligned with reality, now hesitated, contradicting previously confirmed positions. Analysts debated whether fatigue, fear, or collusion was influencing these discrepancies. The lead operative, aware of the psychological strain on every human element in play, noted quietly, "The mole is still active. We must act carefully." No one doubted that within the chaos of desert operations, hidden agendas and divided loyalties could manifest in ways that endangered lives and missions alike. The rogue convoy, meanwhile, approached a natural bottleneck in the canyon. Its movement slowed as drivers attempted to navigate the tricky terrain, the crates of weapons still hidden beneath tarps, but fully within observation range of drones and operatives. Mossad's team coordinated silently, giving real-time adjustments, relaying minute-by-minute updates, and calculating the optimal moment to intercede. The desert, for all its seeming passivity, had become a participant in the operation, shaping movement, concealing threats, and amplifying the smallest miscalculations into potential disaster. Then, in the silence of the canyon, the first hint of a trap became clear. A vehicle detached from the rogue convoy and moved toward a ridge, signaling a possible ambush or attempt to split attention. Field operatives repositioned, recalculating angles, anticipating the potential for a firefight or tactical misdirection. Analysts provided continuous updates, tracking every movement, cross-referencing signals, and predicting the trajectory of both cargo and adversaries. The desert's features, dunes, ridges, shadows, were both obstacle and advantage, depending on which side could anticipate the other first. Tension coiled tightly as operatives closed in. The northernmost vehicle, carrying the heaviest crates, slowed near the ridge. Its guards scanned the surroundings, unaware of the precise observation awaiting them. Mossad operatives whispered coordinates into secure channels, drones transmitting live feeds, every motion synchronized with meticulous care. The Air Force remained ready, yet the choice to strike depended on absolute confirmation, the presence of innocence, and the unpredictable behavior of the mole still shadowing events from the periphery. Every calculation hinged on trust in data, intuition, and human judgment. Suddenly, the rogue convoy began to scatter. Drivers, sensing potential danger, diverged into smaller paths, attempting to evade observation. Operatives adjusted immediately, anticipating movement, tracking multiple vehicles, and maintaining communication across teams dispersed over miles of desert. Analysts at the safe house worked furiously, recalculating strike zones, estimating timing, and providing contingency plans. The human element, the unpredictable decision-making of both smugglers and possible traders, threatened to unspool the operation in an instant. Every second was critical, every movement potentially decisive. One of the field operatives, eyes fixed on a ridge, spotted a lone figure moving unnaturally, slipping along dunes in a pattern that suggested intelligence gathering. Heart-pounding, he whispered into his headset, "We have a tail, possibly a mole or hostile agent." Analysts cross-referenced the figure with intercepted communications, confirming suspicions. Someone outside the convoy was feeding or observing its movement, exploiting gaps in the operation for unknown purposes. The stakes heightened exponentially. Neutralizing the convoy was only part of the mission. Exposure, loss of informants, or intelligence compromise could turn success into catastrophe. The decision was made to intercept the northern convoy first. Operatives moved with precision, surrounding the canyon's narrow passages, using the terrain for cover while remaining undetected. Drones provided live feedback. Satellite imagery offered supplemental verification, and every team member understood the lethal stakes. As they closed in, the rogue drivers reacted, attempting evasive maneuvers, signaling guards, and testing the boundaries of anticipation. The desert echoed with tension, every movement amplified in the silent, unforgiving landscape. Mossad's agents had to act decisively, balancing patience and aggression, all while accounting for the mole whose presence remained unseen yet influential. A tactical maneuver brought operatives within striking distance. Guards reacted to shadows, crates rustled under tarps, and the delicate choreography of interception reached its peak. The first operative signaled the approach, coordinating a silent maneuver to immobilize vehicles without alerting the others. Each action was precise, rehearsed yet dependent on intuition, timing, and split-second judgment. The desert itself seemed to hold its breath, watching as human skill and calculation collided with chance, misdirection, and the ever-present threat of betrayal. The rogue convoy slowed, caught in the web of Mossad's operation. Field operatives blocked exits, drones confirmed positions, and analysts provided updates that allowed precision engagement. For a moment, time hung suspended. Men in vehicles, crates of weapons, and operatives converged in a tableau of calculated danger. And then, the first controlled engagement occurred. Guards immobilized, vehicles secured, crates accounted for. The operation's immediate success was undeniable, yet the shadow of the mole, the dispersed trucks, and the unknown elements in the northern desert ensured that vigilance remained paramount. In the aftermath, the team regrouped, confirming targets, reconciling discrepancies, and tracking every movement of survivors. Field operatives moved cautiously, ensuring no cargo remained hidden, no trace of their presence revealed. The mole's influence was partially detected, subtle misdirections and errant signals, but not fully revealed. Analysts began the painstaking process of identifying potential betrayal, cross-referencing months of intelligence, and preparing for future operations to neutralize lingering threats. As the sun rose fully over the dunes, the desert once again appeared passive, yet every sand ripple, shadow, and footprint bore testimony to the operation that had unfolded under its indifferent gaze. Mossad's strike had neutralized the immediate threat, the cargo destroyed, and the convoy dispersed. Lives had been at risk, human courage had been tested, and months of intelligence work had culminated in a night of tension, calculation, and decisive action. Yet, the operation's consequences, the mole, the scattered cargo, the intelligence gained and lost, would ripple across networks for weeks, months, and perhaps years. Even as operatives exhaled quietly, reviewing the success and noting the areas of lingering uncertainty, the psychological toll was evident. Trust in informants, reliance on human intuition, and coordination across miles of desert and multiple technologies had been tested to the limit. The desert, indifferent yet omnipresent, had revealed the cost of shadow warfare. Victories were hard-won, fragile, and always shadowed by uncertainty. Mossad had acted decisively, yet in the world of espionage, no success was ever absolute, no threat ever entirely neutralized, and no shadow ever completely revealed. The desert, once a silent witness, now seemed to hum with hidden consequences. Even as Mossad operatives regrouped, confirming the neutralization of the southern convoy and the northern intercept, the mole's presence lingered like a shadow stretching across every operation. Analysts at the safe house worked frantically, cross-referencing months of intelligence, reviewing GPS discrepancies, drone feeds, and informant reports. Something subtle, almost imperceptible, threaded through the data. A repeated pattern of delayed reports, minor misdirections, and inconsistencies that suggested human manipulation rather than error. The realization struck hard. This was not just a simple lapse in judgment or a consequence of exhaustion. There was someone within the network feeding fragments of information, and the operation's immediate success had been influenced by it. Field operatives were restless, scanning the dunes for any trace of the rogue agent. Every shadow, every movement in the distance was scrutinized. The desert that had been a theater of action now became a labyrinth of doubt. Even the Bedouin informants, whose loyalty had been relied upon for months, were scrutinized. Fear could breed hesitation, and hesitation could be as dangerous as outright betrayal. A subtle glance, a paused report, a slight change in phrasing, all became signals that had to be interpreted, weighed, and acted upon. Every operative knew the stakes. A mole could undo months of careful surveillance, compromise lives in the field, and allow lethal cargo to reach adversaries. Meanwhile, intelligence from Cairo and Khartoum hinted at repercussions. Signals intercepted from local networks suggested that Iranian handlers were assessing the strike, deducing the reach of Mossad's eyes, and re-evaluating smuggling routes. Analysts debated what this meant for future operations, whether it was a calculated response or a probe to test Mossad's remaining vulnerabilities. One senior operative noted, "They're learning as fast as we act. We must anticipate, not react." Every piece of post-strike intelligence became a delicate puzzle, each hint potentially a trap or a lifeline. The hunt for the mole intensified. Operatives began cross-checking informant reports against satellite tracks and drone observations, looking for patterns that might reveal deception. A critical clue emerged: minor GPS anomalies in the southern convoy's initial path that had never been fully explained. Combined with the erratic movements of the northern rogue vehicle, it became clear that someone had been feeding limited but crucial intelligence to the convoy, allowing minor deviations that tested Mossad's response. The mole was subtle, intelligent, and dangerously embedded, operating in a way that could have gone unnoticed in less meticulous circumstances. In the desert, the field team traced the northern convoy's last known positions, finding remnants of tracks, abandoned vehicles, and discarded tarps. The crates they carried had been recovered, destroyed, or scattered, yet every sign left behind told a story, whispered of choices made in shadow, and hinted at forces unseen. Every detail was cataloged, analyzed, and interpreted for intelligence value, revealing how close the operation had come to unraveling at multiple points. The mole's influence had been enough to test the operative's reflexes, judgment, and patience, and it was a reminder that even the most successful missions carried hidden vulnerabilities. The psychological tension among operatives intensified. Trust, a commodity always in short supply in espionage, was now further strained. Who could be relied upon in the field? Which informants were steadfast and which had been compromised or coerced? Every human element became a question mark. Operatives understood that victory in a strike did not guarantee safety in subsequent operations. The desert's silence, previously an ally in masking movement, now amplified doubt and suspicion, forcing teams to question every report, every observation, and every instinct. As analysts combed the data, patterns emerged pointing to a likely suspect, someone within the network who had access to operational planning and field updates. Their subtle interventions had allowed small deviations in the convoy, ensuring that Mossad's operatives were tested without catastrophic failure. It was a masterclass in silent manipulation. No overt sabotage, no obvious leaks, just enough influence to challenge decision-making, expose vulnerabilities, and test operational limits. Identifying and neutralizing this figure became the new priority, with Mossad's best agents coordinating across multiple time zones, networks, and local contacts. Beyond the mole, the geopolitical ripples of the strike began to manifest. Iranian handlers communicated urgently with local operatives, assessing losses, re-evaluating smuggling routes, and possibly planning retaliatory measures. Analysts in Tel Aviv calculated the potential for escalation, weighing the likelihood of increased smuggling activity, the redeployment of resources, and the potential for further confrontations at sea and across desert corridors. Mossad's operation had neutralized a present threat, but it had also sent signals that would shape adversaries' decisions for months to come. Every action had consequences far beyond the desert dunes. Field operatives, meanwhile, continued combing the terrain. One team discovered subtle signs of an attempted rendezvous. Small, concealed caches, footprints that diverged from expected routes, and evidence of coordinated human movement. These clues hinted that the rogue convoy had not only scattered, but had also been assisted, likely by the very mole whose presence they were now pursuing. The realization sharpened focus, forcing operatives to balance immediate tactical objectives with the strategic necessity of identifying internal threats. One slip, one miscalculation, and months of careful intelligence could be compromised. The mole's true nature slowly revealed itself in small, deliberate patterns. Analysts noted repeated timing discrepancies, field updates delayed just enough to allow certain trucks to diverge, signals slightly off from expected frequencies, and minor inconsistencies in informant reports. Each of these, minor in isolation, became glaring in aggregate, forming a portrait of someone deeply embedded, highly skilled, and capable of manipulating the operation without exposure. Mossad had encountered moles before, but rarely with such subtlety and precision, operating at the edges of visibility, influencing events without tipping off even the most vigilant observers. As operations to track the mole intensified, operatives also prepared for a possible retaliation from the smuggling network. Plans were developed for secondary interception, surveillance of key desert routes, and monitoring of coastal approaches along the Red Sea. Mossad had to anticipate movement of both cargo and personnel, knowing that the network had likely learned from the initial strike. Every decision now required foresight, precision, and careful management of both human and technological assets. The desert remained a deadly chessboard, each dune a potential obstacle, each shadow a potential threat. Psychological strain grew among operatives and analysts alike. Trust was fragile, decisions carried immense weight, and the consequences of error were immediate and severe. The mole's subtle influence forced constant reassessment, yet it also provided a lesson in human intelligence. Even within the most tightly controlled operations, uncertainty and duplicity could never be fully eliminated. The tension, however, sharpened focus, compelling the team to anticipate adversary movements, cross-check every signal, and act decisively when opportunity presented itself. In the northern canyon, remnants of the rogue convoy were finally contained. Crates were secured, vehicles immobilized, and operatives confirmed no additional cargo had escaped. Yet, even in this success, the mole's fingerprints remained. One crate had been subtly relocated. one guard's absence unexplained, a tracker's anomaly still unresolved. Analysts pieced together the clues, formulating hypotheses on the mole's identity, methods, and possible next moves. Every subtle misdirection, every delayed signal, was a thread in a web that had yet to be fully unraveled. Mossad's leadership convened in the safe house to review the operation, the strike, and the mole's influence. Each decision, each action, each observation was dissected, analyzed, and interpreted. The psychological, operational, and strategic dimensions intertwined, success on the desert floor, intelligence gained and lost, and the awareness that the operation's consequences would echo in networks far beyond immediate geography. The mole remained a ghost, influencing events, testing boundaries, and forcing operatives to confront the reality that even victories in espionage were partial, provisional, and often incomplete. By nightfall, the immediate threats had been neutralized, the rogue convoy dismantled, and intelligence recovered. Yet the mole remained undetected in the shadows, a reminder of the constant tension between knowledge and uncertainty, between action and consequence. Mossad operatives reflected on months of surveillance, high-risk maneuvers, and split-second decisions that had shaped the outcome. The desert, silent again, had witnessed not just a successful operation, but the subtle, persistent presence of human unpredictability that defined every intelligence mission. Even as operatives exhaled, reviewing the success and noting areas requiring further investigation, one truth persisted. Espionage was never complete, threats never fully neutralized, and shadows always held secrets. The mole's influence had shaped the operation, tested Mossad's patience, and forced the team to confront the fragility inherent in human intelligence. Victory in the desert was tangible, yet incomplete, a momentary respite in an ongoing, unseen war that would continue to unfold in shadows, signals, and sands far beyond the Red Sea. The desert had grown quiet once more, but in that stillness, the reverberations of the operation lingered, like echoes across the dunes. Mossad operatives gathered in the safe house, reviewing data streams, debriefing informants, and assessing every aspect of the mission. The southern convoy was destroyed, the northern dispersal intercepted, the crates neutralized, yet the subtle shadow of the mole remained, a ghost whose influence had shaped events without ever revealing itself fully. Analysts debated, cross-referenced, and hypothesized, piecing together a mosaic of partial truths, silent interventions, and patterns that hinted at the identity of the unseen hand. Victory had been achieved in tangible terms, but the psychological weight, the knowledge that not every threat had been accounted for, lingered like a persistent desert wind. Outside, the Red Sea stretched in quiet indifference, its waves hiding routes once traversed by smuggling ships, its depths concealing evidence of intercepted arms. Mossad had gained the upper hand, but the operation had revealed a critical lesson. Control was never absolute, and shadows always remained. The mole had tested them, a subtle adversary capable of influencing events with almost surgical precision. That insight would shape the agency's approach in future operations. Every informant, every signal, every minor anomaly would now be scrutinized through the lens of human unpredictability. The desert, indifferent yet omnipresent, had witnessed triumph, risk, and the fragile balance between certainty and doubt. In the following weeks, intelligence flowed back from multiple theaters. Cairo and Khartoum networks indicated confusion and recalibration among Iranian handlers. Their smuggling operations had been disrupted, their confidence shaken, yet subtle adaptations hinted at resilience. Mossad's analysts studied these patterns, anticipating new routes, concealed caches, and potential retaliatory strikes. The strike had succeeded in neutralizing immediate threats, but it had also sent ripples through regional intelligence networks, signaling that Mossad's eyes were far-reaching, precise, and unpredictable. Each intercepted message, each altered communication pattern, became a breadcrumb leading to understanding, but never complete clarity. Meanwhile, field operatives returned to urban cover, blending into civilian networks while continuing discreet surveillance. Informants, whose courage had been crucial in the desert, were quietly repositioned, their identities protected, their contributions acknowledged in silence. The desert's lessons on patience, observation, and the razor-thin margin between success and failure were internalized. Mossad's leadership recognized that the operation's tactical success was inseparable from its psychological complexity, the tension of unknown variables, the mole's hidden influence, and the human courage required to execute in hostile, unpredictable terrain. Yet, even as Mossad consolidated its gains, subtle anomalies persisted. One tracker from the southern convoy, faint but consistent, suggested the possible survival of a minor cache or vehicle. Analysts flagged the signal, initiating a discreet follow-up operation. The mole, still unidentified, had influenced events, perhaps deliberately leaving traces, perhaps manipulating the timeline for reasons only they knew. Mossad's approach shifted from reactive engagement to strategic patience. Every signal, every deviation, every whisper of intelligence became a tool for understanding, predicting, and neutralizing future threats. The operation's broader implications extended beyond immediate intelligence gains. It had disrupted Iranian smuggling routes, exposed vulnerabilities in transnational arms networks, and demonstrated Mossad's capability to execute complex, multi-layered operations across deserts and seas. Regional adversaries recalibrated their strategies, aware that the Israeli intelligence apparatus could strike with precision, patience, and the advantage of unseen eyes. At the same time, Mossad internalized the operation's lessons. Even meticulous planning could not eliminate human unpredictability, the presence of double agents, or the shadowy threads that connected every intelligence network across borders. Psychologically, the operatives felt the lingering tension of the mole's presence. Months of careful coordination, precise surveillance, and split-second decisions had brought success, yet the awareness of unseen influence persisted. Trust, already a scarce commodity in espionage, became both a tool and a vulnerability. Field teams were reminded that human intelligence, while invaluable, could never be fully predictable, and every success carried with it the subtle risk of compromise. Mossad's victory was therefore partial, tactical, and strategic, yet shadowed by the lessons of uncertainty that only experience could teach. The mole's shadow also provided a moral dimension to the operation. The human element, the courage of informants, the patience of field operatives, and the judgment of analysts had been decisive. Success was never merely technological or tactical. It was psychological, emotional, and deeply human. Operatives reflected on the balance between risk and responsibility, the cost of action, and the ever-present tension between control and uncertainty. The desert, silent and vast, had witnessed acts of courage, calculation, and subtle betrayal alike. Mossad had acted decisively, yet it had also been tested in the shadows, reminded that every victory came with hidden variables and lasting consequences. In the weeks and months following the operation, the ripple effects continued. Intelligence gathered from the strike informed subsequent missions, allowing for more targeted interventions against smuggling networks. Adversaries remained cautious, aware of Mossad's reach, but still adapting to their own advantage. Analysts and operatives alike understood that success was iterative. Each operation provided insight, revealed patterns, and created new opportunities, but it also highlighted vulnerabilities and the constant presence of unseen adversaries. The desert's lesson, that vigilance must never waver, that shadows hold secrets, and that human unpredictability is the ultimate variable, remained central. Finally, the operation's legacy crystallized in quiet understanding. Mossad had disrupted a critical arms network, executed complex operations with precision, neutralized immediate threats, and demonstrated operational mastery. Yet the mole's influence, the subtle deviations, and the psychological weight of uncertainty underscored a deeper truth. Espionage was a domain of constant tension, where victory and risk existed in delicate balance, and where shadows were as decisive as action. The Red Sea's waves lapped quietly against distant shores. The desert's sands shifted imperceptibly, and the silent echoes of months of planning, observation, and execution lingered in the minds of those who had walked the dunes, tracked the convoys, and faced the relentless pressure of the unknown. Mossad's operatives, reflecting on the operation, understood that this was one battle in an unending war fought in shadows. The desert had not merely been terrain, it had been a crucible, testing patience, skill, and courage. Informants had risked their lives, operatives had acted with precision under extreme pressure, and the mole had reminded everyone that even in triumph, vulnerability persisted. The operation, cinematic in its execution and silent in its triumph, had altered intelligence networks, reshaped smuggling routes, and left an indelible imprint on both Mossad and the adversaries it confronted. As night fell once more over the dunes, the operation concluded not with fanfare, but with quiet reflection, a recognition that success in espionage is measured not only in immediate outcomes, but in the lessons learned, the patterns observed, and the shadows that remain unexplored. Mossad had struck. The cargo was neutralized, the adversaries unsettled, and yet the human complexities, the mole, the risks, the psychological toll, remained. The desert had witnessed a triumph, but it had also reminded everyone involved that in the world of espionage, certainty is fleeting, vigilance must be eternal, and shadows hold the ultimate truths. The story of Operation Harbor Light, its audacious strikes, its high-stakes pursuit, its human courage, and its subtle betrayals, would remain a quiet legend within Mossad, a testament to the precision, patience, and peril of intelligence warfare. The dunes, the sea, the trackers, and the shadows would all carry its memory, a reminder that in espionage, victory is never complete, threats are never entirely neutralized, and every success is inseparable from the unseen forces that shape it.